All right. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. It's good to have you with us today. We're talking about the class today. Spoiler alert, Moses didn't write this. And before we pulled you into this fun conversation, I was talking to Todd and Angel. We're talking about the idea of sorting things based on internal evidence from the text. And Todd mentioned how Clody had pulled together some information from the book of Jeremiah, working with some of the material that I taught in that series, and laid things out in order. So if you take the book of Jeremiah, most of you know this, but some might be listening on YouTube that didn't yet listen to the 25-part series on Jeremiah. But in that series, what we did was I recognized that Jeremiah is not in order. Now, I'm not the only one. Like, anybody who's ever read it notices this. But what I tried to do in teaching that series was to show at every turn what that order should look like. And then by the end of that series, Seth really was coming on board and helping to illustrate that, so showing different things on a timeline. Well, the same thing needs to happen in the Pentateuch, particularly when it comes to the life and laws of Moses. Different people have different things that they love, different books that they love more than others. It's no secret Leviticus is not my favorite book of the Bible, but I'm going to teach through that, and we're going to look at from Exodus 40 through Numbers chapter 7, 8, and 9, and we're going to pull all that together, and we're going to present this. You'll see as we come to it. And it is not so unlike what we saw in the Jeremiah study. So,
hey, it's funny you brought up Leviticus. I was telling her last night that wouldn't it be funny if we put together like a humorous book of the first 17 chapters of the priest's recipes and how to cook them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Of course, she was saying, oh, us being vegan, that might not be a good idea.
Well, I don't know. You could probably buy some good stuff with all the money you'd make, because people like that. I mean, look, there are sometimes Biblical Archaeology Review will publish various ancient recipes that have been discovered a few years ago. I don't drink alcohol, but I haven't always been on that kick. I used to drink, but I remember when they found this. They found jugs like in Philistine territory that had residue of beer, ancient beer.
Mm-hmm.
And
the Egyptians used to make beer.
Yeah, and so they extracted some of this, and they did some analysis, and you could actually go to some of these places and get you a Philistine beer, which I thought was pretty cool. But there are other things that, without advocating anyone to take alcohol into their body and harm themselves, there are other recipes that might be good. We could advertise maybe. So
yeah, a guy that I used to hang out with, used to work at a local brewery here. He made his own beer, and he took the oldest recipe, Egyptian recipe that he could find, like thousands of years old, and made his rendition of it. And it was some of the nastiest stuff I've ever tasted.
Hey, I guess if you're I was going to say Philistine, but it might be the same thing if you're Egyptian. But but it might be too that they left out one secret ingredient. Sometimes people, when like grandmothers or whatever, their recipe book, it's like they smile at us from heaven because they left out the thing that made it so perfect, their chocolate pie. People used to joke about one of my grandmothers that she always made the best chocolate pie, but after she died, everybody scrambled to get the recipe, and everybody who made it, theirs tasted exactly like each other's, but it didn't taste like the grandmother's. And that was the joke, is that girl, man, she went to the grave with that secret, and she's laughing at us from another realm. So maybe these Egyptians said, hey, don't put less hops or something, and let's laugh at them from the afterlife. So who knows?
I tell you, they were laughing when I tasted that thing.
Nasty, huh?
But yeah, that's all I got for now. I do have something for later, but it's totally different.
Okay.
subject.
All right. Yep. All right. So I'm looking forward to the questions and comments from many of you who are with us today. I'm interested to see what some of this good stuff is. Now, let me see. I think I have somewhere the YouTube chat just to make sure. I see Miriam, and so Miriam, you are welcome on the Zoom side of things too. And just make sure if you need that, let me know. But we're here, and so it's good to see you, but I thought maybe you might have had a question. So I'm going to keep an eye on the YouTube chat as well, but if some of you have questions, jump in. Now, what I will say is this is Leviticus. Most of you know this, and these we put out mainly just so you have a study tool. To be honest, the only reason we publish these is because I wanted a notebook to take my notes in. And I had ordered on Amazon, I have them on the shelf behind me, ESV, a Christian translation. Well, ASV is also Christian too, but the ESV is a more modern translation, and they put out the scripture journal. And I thought, man, that's cool because I can have my Hebrew Bible open and I can write my notes as I work my way through the text of Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. So I bought them. But as soon as I opened them, I was like, if this had the Torah readings in it, that'd be great. If it had the white spaces, the Petucha and the Setumah, if it had the ancient triennial readings. Anyway, sooner or later, I said, hey, I think I'll just make my own. And Seth said, yeah, we can get them printed and people can use them if they want them. You don't have to get these. If you have a Bible and a notebook, but I think they're fun and they're valuable for those who want them. So anyway, but Leviticus begins next week. That's right, next week, April the 5th, that's Sabbath, which means that this coming Thursday, Jono and I will do a show on that first reading from Leviticus. Vayikra is the first Torah portion, which is chapter 1, I think, through like chapter 6, something like that. And so I look forward to doing that with Jono. And then my first Saturday in April, I'll be talking about Vayikra, that particular Torah portion. So I look forward to our study in Leviticus. If you've been following us for a while, in the Exodus series, which we called Leaving Egypt, I had a whole list of books that I recommend for reading that will help you with your study of Exodus in that case. Today, after the class and the discussion is over, I'm going to begin to make that list for our Leviticus study. And I've already got some of the books before me just so you can see them. This is the BHQ, you get it where you can see it, the Biblia Hebraica Quinta edition. It's the latest scholarly edition of the Hebrew text. Like, most scholarly Bibles are the Biblia Hebraica Stuttgartensia. It's called that because it's from a German school, and they always like that Latin stuff. So it's the Biblia Hebraica that was published in Stuttgart. So that's why you get the cool name Stuttgartensia. Well, this is the 5th edition of that work, but it's not all finished. So I own, some of you were beautiful friends and bought me some of these, Genesis, Leviticus, and Deuteronomy. We don't yet have Exodus. We don't yet have Numbers completed, but as soon as those are ready. So the reason I'm telling you all that is because when I prepare a class, I'm not just looking at the standard Hebrew text behind the English translation. I'm looking at Dead Sea Scrolls. I'm trying to figure out what are some interesting things to bring into these classes. And this particular text, the BHQ, or the BHS if you use that, has all those additional footnotes in it. So good stuff. All right. Man, I'm going to tell you what, let me check YouTube. I want to make sure I don't miss any questions there. All right. Miriam, if I don't see you show up in just a few minutes, I will send you a link to get in the Zoom. We want to bring all of our supporters, just as a way of saying thank you, into the Zoom call and make sure that they have access to this from that angle. But if you're in the YouTube, you can ask questions or give comments as well, and we'll try to read them out. All right. So a couple of other books that I'll recommend, and you'll see these in links to the Leviticus. If you're really into the priestly material and you want to study Leviticus, Todd, this is a good one for you right here. Jacob Milgram. I'm joking, Todd, but it is a good book as far as Leviticus goes. And then the scholar Jacob Milgram, same guy, is the author of the Leviticus series in the Anchor Bible Dictionary. The difficulty is that Anchor Bible Dictionary isn't complete either. These are still in the works. These are great academic commentaries. Leviticus is chapter 1 through 16, and that's all that's covered. But that gives us a good bit. What else? Let's see. Do we have any comments? Let me pick up a couple here in the Zoom, and feel free to raise your hand and jump up and ask your own question, but I can read it if you don't want to jump up yet. Michael, I'm going to give you a second. Do you want to jump in and ask your question? And maybe we'll open it up to the floor for others to comment as well, or do you want me to read it? And I'm give you just a couple of minutes to raise your hand. If not, I'll go ahead and read it. Michael says, give strong drink to the one who is perishing and wine to those in bitter distress. Let them drink and forget their poverty and remember their misery no more. Proverbs chapter 31, verse 6 and 7. It's also the lyrics to a country song. I don't know about that, but it would be. You know, we've got some that play instruments. Put some lyrics to that. Give strong drink to the one who's perishing and wine to those in bitter distress. My wife done left me and took my dog, and just strum it away. All right, let's see. Scott says, who is the angel in Exodus 23, 20 through 26? He is to lead Moses, and everyone is supposed to obey him. He is given authority. Is he also the cloud they follow? I'm not going to jump right off in that yet, but we're not going to leave it all day. We'll come back. And then Eric says, heads up, I have a comment pending on intercession and the Moses scroll, FA2. So if you have these questions or comments, raise your hand. I want to hear from you. And while I wait just a second, let me send the link to someone who needs it. 1 minute. Mm-hmm. I'm close. 1 second, folks. Coming at you, Miriam. We have our friends that sometimes don't have the link, and I want to make sure I take care of that. So, Miriam, check your messages on YouTube, and on Facebook, and that's where you'll get the link. There it is. All right. Let me see if I've got some hands raised. I'm sure that somebody said, I got to jump in here. Not yet. Not yet. Okay. Hey, one of the questions that I have, and I'm looking for some input from some of you, is how many of you saw the discussion that I had earlier, that aired earlier in the week with the boys of the Jesus Way podcast? And Todd, you guys I hope you're raising your hand to talk. Let me go ahead and bring you in.
Oh, I wasn't gonna say nothing. I'm
Oh,
just,
were you just saying you
I'm just
saw it?
kidding.
Or, okay.
No, we watched it, and I thought you did really good. Of course, you had us cracking up a lot of times too with some of the stuff you were saying.
Yeah.
Seemed like you had a pretty good time with them. We were also watching this morning the debate that those two guys had with Wes and Steven.
Yeah.
And I had to comment on there. So this is like watching a CNN debate because the
Yeah.
moderators on their side
Oh, yeah.
making Aaron and them answer quickly and giving all the rest of the time to Wes and them. I'm sort of going, wow, this looks familiar.
Yeah, that was pretty scandalous. Actually, it was pretty bad. In fact, leading up to that, first of all, let me just say, Aaron and let me think. Not only Aaron, it's James and Cameron. All those guys, I really like those guys. I know Cameron really well. Cameron had called me. We're doing some projects together, and he had called me some time back when Wes Huff first debated Billy Carson. I don't know if some of you may not even know what I'm talking about here. There was a big debate, and Wes Huff, who is an apologist Christian, nice young guy, seems to be really nice, handily defeated Billy Carson in a debate. And this thing went viral to the point that ultimately you had Wes Huff ended up on Joe Rogan's podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Well, just so happened that Aaron and Cameron were already scheduled to debate Wes and one of his buddies, the guys you're talking about. So they spent some time kind of working with and going through some texts with Dr. James Tabor and I, and it was fun. So I really got to know those guys. The biggest thing that I think they struggle with when you debate a fundamentalist, whether a person is Jewish or Christian, like we have people who listen to, and you're welcome, by the way, if you're a fundamentalist, but fundamentalists, Jews and Christians, their answers are already, they know their answers because they're told what to believe. So, for instance, if I say, well, this does not reflect Moses' hand, a fundamentalist Jewish person says, yes, it is. And the same answer you'll get from a Christian. So I'm not a fundamentalist. I'm looking at the text and using common sense to determine authorship. So sometimes an apologist, whether a Jew or a Christian, may take offense at my words, which is not intended. But you'll see them. They show up from time to time, and they always give the answer that is in their theological dictionary. But I'm not sort of independent.
I'm actually surprised that those guys aren't here because they don't seem to be much different than us.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was really shocked because I was telling her, I was going, I wonder why those guys don't come on the Zoom call or any of that stuff because they're not much different than what we are asking questions. And
oh, yeah. Well, just for starters, Aaron, I don't know him as well as I know Cameron, but Aaron's, he's a busy guy. Now he's more new agey, as we say.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a word, agey. And I mean, I love the guy, nice guy, and we have a great relationship. We just started, became friends not long ago. But that's the way he's described. I should be fair. But once you get to know him, the guy's very knowledgeable about text and particularly when it comes to the Hebrew gospel. But a lot of people kind of back up when they see his YouTube channel. He's got like 300,000 subscribers or more. I mean, he's a big wheel in this world. Well, that keeps him pretty busy. So, like a lot of times, I'd love to listen to other teachers, but I'm, pretty busy too, so I don't have time. And I think that's his reason. Same thing goes for Cameron, who spends time, he does keep up with the classes. He doesn't necessarily watch them live. But, he's done Seaspiracy, Cowspiracy, Christspiracy. He's traveling all over the world doing interviews and things like that. So mainly, Todd, they're just busy. I think that's the main reason.
Oh, yeah, makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But I had written down some notes I thought was interesting that you and Jonah was talking about. and especially when it came to the generational curses.
Yeah.
And we were discussing this. As far as generational curses, it says, the father will give, to the third and fourth generation and all that.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I buy into that. She doesn't either. As far as a father cursing a family like that for one person.
Yeah.
But the father can teach his son, then his son, then his son, and the generations go down like that.
Yeah.
And when it says that he will visit upon the generations, I think that's him saying, I will show up and see if there's a righteous one.
Maybe. I got you. Yeah.
I mean, it could be.
Well,
when he says he will visit, I mean,
you're right to dig into that, and you may have, kind of scratched into what that really means, because it can't mean, based on other texts, that Seth has to pay for my sins. That can't be. Now, and a lot of people explain it this way. Yeah, but you can pass on some bad habits and so forth. But it doesn't necessarily mean and there are texts which say Exodus 18 and Jeremiah 30 both have this phrase. Where did you learn? This is what I love about them. They say, where did you learn this proverb that says that fathers eat sour grapes and the children's teeth are set on edge? In other words, the kids pay for what the parents did. And the response is that's not part of God's original law, not the way that's understood. And the other thing, and I just saw JJ pointed it out, and that's true, the word generations is not in the Hebrew. Now, what does that mean? I don't know, but it's not there. It says to the third and unto the fourth. Now, people supply the word generations, but it's still part of the debate. We have to think, what does that mean? I don't know.
Well, that's also mentioned in the Moses scroll that you have on page 165. Where it says, the iniquity of the fathers be upon to the third and fourth generation for lifting my name to deceive.
Right.
And now that's the curse. As far as the blessing, that's on 166. To fear me and to guard all my commandments in the days in order it might go well. Yeah. I still say when he says he's going to visit, that means he's looking for one that's righteous. Yeah. So he'll go to to the son, that ain't good enough. So he'll go to the grandson later, that ain't good enough. The great grandson, he'll do it. Well,
I love the text when you get into this subject, and I know you guys study a lot. Deuteronomy 24:16 is an interesting passage, and then you look at Jeremiah 30, and Ezekiel 18 is probably this is the end of the kingdom of Judah in terms of chronology, and Ezekiel's really trying to hammer this home. He goes, okay, I'm paraphrasing. Let's say that you got a righteous father and a wicked son. The wicked son does not get the righteousness of the father, and blah, and it goes on. And he goes, well, hang on. Let's say that the father is, and it goes all the examples, because just as you don't inherit a sin nature like Christians teach, neither are you righteous because your parents were righteous. It's not transferable, I guess we would say. By the way, let me bring in a couple of the comments from online. Dale Hurley has a good point here. Children also pay the price for the sin of the father. Dad murdered and is in jail. Children grow up fatherless. So I think that there's something to that idea too. You could say, well, this is one obvious, cause and effect, if you will. Right.
Yeah, I mean, if you think righteousness passes down to the kids, I mean, there is a title called PK, pastor's kids.
Yeah.
Wildest ones you'll ever meet.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So it does not trickle downhill like people think it does.
That's right.
But something else that brought it that we got to thinking of too, when you and Ross was talking about Leviticus and everything else.
Him and Jonah.
Or you and Jonah.
I talked to myself about it too, though, Angel.
But we were kind of thinking to ourselves, it's like, why would the Father create a priesthood that relies on other people to survive, as in the sacrifices and the tithes and offerings and everything. I mean, it kind of brings you to, if you want to eat, you got to work.
Mm-hmm.
And there was, Proverbs is full of that. There's, three different, just off the top of my head, there's 3 verses of Proverbs I found on that. Paul uses it to twist to his benefit because he wanted to get paid for everything.
Yeah.
But it's just something we just got to thinking of. It's like, well, why would he create a priesthood that relies on others for their survival when you're supposed to work for your own bread?
Well, we also have, even when you talk about the Levites, people say, well, they had no land inheritance, but we have Levitical land that's built into the whole system. So there's a whole lot about this Levitical and the families of these priests. By the way, Karen is a preacher's kid, and I was thinking that she either may or may not prove your point about those preacher's kid, but she says depends on the kid, but that still leaves it open. I don't know if she's one of those good preacher's kids or I don't know. I'm assuming she was just perfect growing up and even now. So,
well, for some reason, from what she said, Karen dubbed me as Tovia Todd last night. I don't know where that came from.
Oh, really? All right. All right.
Maybe she can explain that.
Yeah. Well, the whole thing about the priesthood, I mean, I have questions. Every week, I'll teach a class, but I promise you that I have a lot of questions that are generated from my studies as well. And I mentioned a while ago, I know the Christian answers, I know the Jewish answers, and I find them both wanting. Because both camps represent a type of fundamentalism that is a bridge too far for me. And so what I want to do is I want to begin to look at if we could get past that. The reason I love the Dead Sea Scrolls so much, and the reason I spend a lot of time thinking about that is because my good friends, the fundamentalists, whether Jews and rabbi friends or Christians and preachers and all of that, is because they have a certain view of what they've inherited. They've inherited the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help me God. And for the Jewish people, they say the Masoretic text is the holy, inspired, authoritative, inerrant word of God. A lot of people even believe that if you do equidistant letter spacing, that you find hidden codes within the Torah. It is so perfect. And I know that that's the fundamentalist view. I don't ascribe to that, and I tell you why. Up until the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls, winter of 1946-47, the oldest complete Hebrew Bible is called B19, the Leningrad Codex. And this Leningrad Codex is a handwritten manuscript which contains the vowel pointings attributed to a school of Masoretes that's considered to be the most reputable. And here's the deal. But it dates back to roughly 1008, 1009 of the Common Era for my Christian friends, AD CE, same time. But that's it. Now, we have some sections that are older, and some people go, well, what about the Aleppo Codex? Well, unfortunately, the Aleppo Codex is missing almost all of the Torah, the Pentateuch, but just so you know, that's roughly about the same time. So imagine the critics of the Bible at that time, they had translations, Septuagint, but we have vast differences between the Greek manuscripts, the Septuagint, and the Hebrew manuscripts of the Masoretic text. Now, here's what happens. This is what I love about critical biblical studies. Let's say this is 1945. No discovery of Cave 1 yet. And there's an argument. A rabbi might say, the Septuagint doesn't agree with the Masoretic text, and therefore the Hebrew is right and the Greek is wrong, because the Greek is a translation of my original Hebrew. And everybody says, yay, yes, they're right, yes, they're right. Well, the guy with the Septuagint said, we've got copies dating to the 4th century of the Common Era, 4th century AD. Ours is more accurate. And they say, no, the rabbi would say, no, the Masoretic text was faithfully translated in a consonantal text all the way down to our era, and it's perfect. And so you go, well, I don't think that's true. But there was nothing really to weigh in on the argument. Now, other people had the Samaritan Pentateuch that could be studied. A few texts here and there, and other sections of the Bible. Then Bedouin go into a cave, and in that cave, they find these ancient manuscripts that have not been maintained or corrupted. Well, people can argue if they're corrupted or not, but they've not been in the possession of Jews or Christians. They've just been in a cave. So I think that this kind of knocks the door out from, knocks the door open and gives us some insight into what the ancient text may have actually said. Let me give you an example. If you want to say, well, I believe the Masoretic text is right and it's more right than the Septuagint, we now have text discovered at Qumran that the Hebrew seems to be we call it the Forlaga, what is under the Greek. So in other words, if you look at the Septuagint and you go, well, that doesn't match the Masoretic text. In other words, if the Greek is a translation of the Masoretic text, the Greek is wrong. But now with some of the Dead Sea Scrolls, we have some of the Greek manuscripts that some of the Hebrew manuscripts that reflect more accurately to what the Greek says, meaning are strongly suggesting that a text which we no longer have in Hebrew is reflected in the Septuagint, and it wasn't the Masoretic text. Anyway, on and on and on.
There's something else y'all are talking about too, and that with Aaron and Cam. Where you are talking about the sacrifices, and you kept mentioning the verses about the sacrifices and why it shouldn't have and everything. The thing that started sticking in my head is like, okay, but what about the verses that says, if you just come back to me, I'll take you. And of course, first thing that popped in my head was in Jeremiah. Yeah. And as I kept reading, especially Jeremiah 3, as I kept reading this, I ran across something that I'm sure you've seen, and it might have hit you. I don't know. It might not have. Everybody sees things different. But, he says, acknowledge your guilt that you've rebelled against the Lord, scatter your favors among strangers of the green tree, and have obeyed my voice, says the Lord. Return, O faithless children, for I am your master. I will take you, one from a city and two from a family, and bring you to. What I find interesting, I mentioned this last night with Dave. Mm-hmm. It's interesting, one from a city, two from a family. Well, we mentioned last night that we live in a pretty big area here, and we can't find anywhere. There's not a Messianic church, a synagogue, or a church that is not tradition. Everything's tradition. Yeah. And that's not us.
Tradition.
So exactly. So it's basically we're one in a city. But it's also interesting, two from a family. Well, that's me and her, and neither one of us talk to either one of our families anymore.
Yeah.
We're the weird. Yeah, we're the weird ones. So, or the kooks, as they call it, as Wes and them call it.
Oh yeah.
I'm sure you saw that.
I did.
But it's interesting here because right now we have 38 people on the Zoom call. That's not very many.
Yeah, and another 36, assuming they're different, on the YouTube. So we've got a little bit of both, but yeah.
Yeah, and so it's really weird how the prophets, because Enoch's the same way too. The books will be opened later, down the road to those who are willing to listen. Well, that's us.
Yeah.
So that prophecy is coming true as well. So it's just interesting that as we study in these rabbit holes, as everybody calls them, that you just run across stuff that parallels what you're going through now.
Yeah.
Or what we're all going through now. So I just thought that was really interesting. And one more question I had for you.
Okay.
It seems to me, and I'm sure that you've thought this too, but it seems to me the Moses Scroll is not all there. I think the Moses Scroll is a portion of something that else has already been written, and all we have left is the Moses Scroll. Because it seems to start like there was something before that.
That's what.
And why would you just start with the story?
The story has to start somewhere, and it doesn't mean. Let me give it a little qualifier here. By the way, Carolyn, I see your hand raised. We're coming to you. Eric, I see your comments. I have some responses to some of those, and that's coming too. But let me just say, so when I first translated the Moses Scroll, and I know that some of our viewers, I can tell they've not read the book. I mean, it's obvious they've not read the book. Some of them comment on the Moses Scroll and or any other thing, but they've clearly not read the book. And I think it's very important. I've sent free copies out to people just to get them to read the book. But when we talk about the Moses Scroll, we know from the biblical account that Moses wrote something. Tradition says that Moses wrote the 5 books from Genesis 1 to Deuteronomy 34:12. That's tradition. That's all that is. There are things, and I'm saying this for years now, that Moses did not write. We gave examples today, and there are a lot of them. But because of the matter that it doesn't have much in it, people go, oh, there's got to be more. I heard somebody the other day say it assumes that we know something else. There's a discussion on the United Israel list right now, and some people are commenting on it, and I've made some comments as well. So here's an example. Forget the Moses Scroll. Throw the book away, and let's just look at the Pentateuch for a minute. When I was reading, when this all hit me, Deuteronomy 31, verse 9, and Deuteronomy 31, verse 24 through 26, one day I read that, and it hit me like it never hit me before. Moses completed his Torah. Actually, it's HaTorah Hazot, or HaTorah Hazeh. He completed this Torah unto the very end, and he gave it to the Leviim, who bear the Ark of the Covenant, and to the elders of Israel. And he said, keep this. And then 24 through 26 says basically the same thing. And I remember being literally rocked back, thinking, wait a minute. Somebody, not Moses, is telling me that Moses finished his scroll, his Torah to the very end. Deuteronomy isn't even over yet. And then I said, wait a minute. This is I know you know this, but bear with me, Todd. Let me get on my soapbox for a minute. So people, what happened was I said, wait, this is third person. Well, let me read. I read the whole story again, and I said, okay, put Genesis aside. Let's go from Exodus to the end of Deuteronomy and look at first and third person. 649 times in the Pentateuch, Moses is mentioned. The Lord spoke unto Moses, saying, and the Lord spoke unto Moses and Aaron. Clearly, Moses didn't write any of that. Now, somebody is telling me that story. Now, what I did find is that in Deuteronomy, there are some examples, about 38, I think, maybe a little bit more, references in the first person, things that Moses could have written. So I didn't know about Shapira. I didn't know about the Moses Scroll. And I started looking and thinking, what did Moses write? So if you do a search, and all this is in my book, The Moses Scroll, if you do a search on every occurrence of the word katav tied to Moses, meaning these are indications in the 5 books of Moses writing something, you begin to build a list of what an ancient author is telling me was in the scroll that Moses wrote. The commandments, the blessings and the curses. Guess what? Deuteronomy doesn't even have the blessings. It has the curses, but it's missing the blessings. So that's not the scroll that Moses wrote. On and on. So I built a list. I didn't know about Shapira, didn't know about the Moses scroll. I had 7 things that the authors were telling me were in that scroll. Now, if I had to make that list, I'd build it a certain way. There'd be dietary rules, there'd be this, there'd be that, there'd be, there'd be all the festivals, because that's what I know is part of the Pentateuch. However, when you think about it and you examine what is found in the Moses scroll, and people can debate whether it's authentic, but I encourage them to read the story first. It's a much smaller book. That doesn't mean that other scribes, other priests didn't write histories. Some have an idea that Genesis contains within it what's called a novella about Joseph that would begin roughly in Genesis 37 and carry us through the end of Genesis. Who could have written that? I don't know. Could be that somebody in the land of Egypt wrote that. But where did that come from? Could be. And then we have other stories that filter in as well. But when it comes to what did Moses write, all right, now put all of that on a shelf and consider this. Who wrote the Psalms?
So supposedly David did.
David was one of the authors.
And Korah and...
You got it. Yeah, I'm not quizzing you. I know you know this, but so you've got some texts that are, some of the Psalms are written by the sons of Korah. Some are by Asaph. Some are by David. And so if I did a study, I was telling a family member the other day, I'm going to put one of my granddaughters who is currently watching the David series on a task and have her read only the Psalms of David, the Psalms attributed to David. And that's not all of them. We have 150 Psalms, but how many are Davidic Psalms? If you want to look at the historical David, that'd be a place to start. So now go back to the Pentateuch. How much of that is written by Moses? And I think that if you look at the Moses scroll, even if you look at Deuteronomy, you're dealing with something that Moses could have written because it reflects his time, the time of Moses. Now, but we also see a lot of later priestly things, and I'm going to challenge people big time this Passover. It's coming. I'm going to say, because everybody pictures that Passover is a key, one of the kernels of the faith. Woo, get ready, because we're gonna jump deep into that. So, in other words, what if the biblical story has undergone vast embellishments, vast expansions, like really, really vast? Give you an example. How much of the Bible has to do with the monarchies? From the time that the people request a king, which God didn't know anything about, according to the text. He was surprised, just like Samuel was. 1 Samuel 8, 1 Samuel 12. From that time all the way until Zedekiah has his eyes poked out after watching his sons get killed, that roughly 400 years, none of that was God's will.
Mm-hmm.
So let's take the monarchy out. Then look at the temple. Did God ever want a temple and sacrifices? Not according to the text of the writers. Now, there are other writings which reflect this tension in the text. So I'm saying if we peel back all the way through this, we come to the kernel. And I think that and by the way, I should have started this with, well, Todd, you and I have a lot to talk about because I do trust your inquisitive nature, and you and I are going to have some good back and forth on this, as well as other people. In other words, is there more to what Moses wrote, or did Moses write just the basics, what the Bible says he wrote, and other people wrote other things. Like David wrote some Psalms and other people wrote other Psalms. And I think that's the case. But what happens is people go, all right, I read the Moses Scroll, and that's a short book, and I really like Leviticus 18 and the stuff about sexuality and how you're supposed to interact with members of your family and not interact with others. And somebody goes, I really want that to be part of the Torah. And somebody else said, I really like Numbers chapter 5 and the story of the Sotah, where a woman is thought to have committed adultery. I really want that in my Torah. So I think that was probably there, and we just don't have that scroll. Look, I'm saying that all these other priestly elements come in from different hands, and they've been attached to what Moses wrote. I think Moses started his Torah this way. God told us, you've been at Horeb long enough, set out, and then they do, and he gives the account of the giving of the Torah, the 10, and the blessings and the curses, but that's up for discussion. This is all just fun stuff. There are two. I will shut up in a minute, I promise. There are two major schools of thought when it comes to the Moses Scroll from those who think it might be authentic. School number one, it represents a copy of what is the authentic scroll of Moses. It's not the scroll. Like I saw somebody on one of my YouTube videos the other day, clearly hasn't read the Moses Scroll. But this person, you've heard of a hammer and a nail. Everything to this person is a nail because he hits everything with the same hammer. But this person was looking at, I don't know what, but just making stuff up, not knowing anything about the Moses Scroll. And they said, clearly this isn't the original scroll that Moses wrote because Hebrew wasn't invented at that time. Duh, right? So you're like, I'm not saying, you didn't even, you have no idea of the arguments that are going on in academia right now. Has nothing to do, we're talking about the text that's behind this translation. That's what's so important. So, so anyway, there's one school that says the text that was discovered in a cave high in the Wadi Mujib, all the different details of that, in 1865, 2 copies of the same manuscript, reflects a proto-biblical book that was the formation. In other words, other priestly elements were added to that work to get the Deuteronomy that we have. That's one school. The other school is the Moses Scroll represents a liturgical vest pocket version of the original book that Moses wrote, like a Moses's greatest hits. That Moses wrote a longer scroll and it said, make sure you keep the Passover, make sure you keep the 7 festivals of the Lord. Here they all are. I'm going to lay them all out for you. Oh, by the way, don't forget to go to Jerusalem 3 times a year. And it's got all these other, and by the way, don't sleep with your aunt. And also, all these other things. All of that's the original, but the Moses Scroll, they would say, represents sort of just the greatest hits section. It's a vest pocket. I'm of the opinion that the text or a text like the Moses Scroll matches more closely with what Moses wrote, and then there were other things that were written by other people, other scribes, primarily of the Levitical clan. So there you go. That's in a long, drawn-out answer. But your view that you just expressed is a popular view that says maybe there was more. Now, in just a few minutes, we'll tell our YouTube audience goodbye, and I will give you one thing that I think might blow your mind about another scroll. After all of that, now who wrote it? That's a different question. But we're currently investigating, and I'll get into that just a few minutes.
Okay.
can I say, I wanted to get to some of these other points, but I tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to say goodbye to our YouTube audience. And I promise I'll try to watch those points a little closer next time. And maybe some of these, I'll save all these questions and comments, and we'll probably answer some of them in the Discord chat. I think that's a good place to look. So Shabbat Shalom to our YouTube audience. Good to have you with us. We'll see you later in the week. God bless you. Come again.